There is a reason for this, and it is not random. What you're experiencing is not simply memory. It is something deeper, something that Carl Jung would describe as a message from the unconscious, a part of your psyche that does not speak through logic, but through emotion, symbols, and repetition. And when something repeats itself in your inner world, it is not trying to punish you. It is trying to reach you. The pain is not meaningless. It is not accidental. It is a signal that something within you has not yet been fully seen, understood, or integrated. Jung believed that beneath your conscious awareness exists an entire landscape, a hidden dimension of your mind that holds everything you have experienced, everything you have felt, especially the things you tried to forget. This is not a passive storage space. It is active, alive, constantly influencing how you think, how you feel, and how you respond to the world. And within this inner world lives what Jung called the shadow, the part of you that contains everything you have pushed away, denied, or refused to acknowledge. The shadow is not just darkness in the negative sense. It is everything that has been rejected, including your fears, your insecurities, your guilt, but also your hidden strengths, your unexpressed desires, and your unrealized potential. It forms gradually, often beginning in childhood, when you learn what is acceptable and what is not, what will be praised and what will be criticized. The parts of you that do not fit the expectations around you are not destroyed. They are simply pushed out of awareness and into the unconscious, where they continue to exist. And here is the important truth. What is pushed into the unconscious does not disappear. It remains, and it seeks expression. Sometimes it appears in dreams, sometimes in sudden emotional reactions, and often in the form of memories that refuse to stay buried. So when a painful memory resurfaces, it is not just the past returning. It is your shadow asking to be recognized. It is, in a sense, a call from within, asking you to turn toward it rather than away from it. Think about the patterns in your life for a moment. Have you ever felt as though you keep encountering the same type of pain, the same kind of relationship, the same internal struggle, even when you try to change? Jung would say that this is not coincidence. It is the unconscious repeating itself until it is made conscious. Because until you see what is hidden, it continues to shape your life from behind the scenes, guiding your choices, influencing your reactions, and creating experiences that reflect what has not yet been healed. The shadow often reveals itself through relationships. When someone hurts you deeply, it is natural to focus on their actions, their behavior, their role in your pain. And while their actions are real and valid, Jung invites you to look at another layer, one that is not about blaming yourself, but about understanding yourself. He suggests that the intensity of your emotional reaction often points to something within you that is already sensitive, already wounded, already unresolved. This does not mean that others are not responsible for their behavior. It means that your inner world is involved in how that experience affects you. A betrayal may reopen a deeper fear of abandonment. A rejection may touch an older belief that you are not enough. A loss may awaken a sense of emptiness that existed long before that particular event. In this way, the outer experience becomes a mirror, reflecting something that exists within. If you pause for a moment and bring to mind a person who hurt you, You may notice that the pain is not only about what they did, but about what it meant to you, what it confirmed, what it seemed to prove. And this is where transformation begins, not by denying the hurt, but by asking a different question. Instead of only asking why it happened, you begin to ask what it reveals about your inner world. What belief did it touch? What fear did it activate? What part of you did it bring to the surface? This shift is subtle but powerful, because as long as your focus remains entirely on the external, your sense of power remains tied to something outside of you. But when you turn inward with curiosity instead of judgment, you begin to reclaim that power. You begin to see that while you cannot control what has happened, you can understand how it lives within you, and in doing so, you can begin to transform it. Jung emphasized that the unconscious does not communicate in direct language. It speaks in images, in feelings, in recurring themes. This is why certain memories feel so vivid, almost as if they are happening again, because they are not simply stored as information, they are charged with emotional energy. And until that energy is acknowledged and integrated, it continues to seek expression. Consider how often self-worth becomes entangled with past experiences. You may look at yourself and feel that you fall short in some way, that you are not enough, not capable, not deserving. But these conclusions are rarely objective truths. They are interpretations formed from past experiences, stories that have been repeated so often that they begin to feel like reality. And yet, they are still stories, narratives shaped by moments that were never fully understood. Jung would say that to change these narratives, you must first become aware of them. You must notice the voice within that speaks in doubt, in criticism, in limitation. And then, instead of automatically believing it, you begin to question it. Where did it come from? What experience created it? What part of you still holds on to it? This is not about forcing positivity. It is about bringing awareness to what has been operating unconsciously. Imagine walking through a dark forest where you cannot see clearly, where every shadow feels uncertain, where every sound feels amplified. This forest represents your unconscious, your past, your hidden experiences, and within it are the parts of you that have not yet been integrated. Jung did not suggest avoiding this forest. He believed that entering it with awareness and courage is the path to transformation, because within that darkness is not only pain, but also insight, not only fear, but also strength. The parts of you that you have avoided are not only sources of discomfort, they are also sources of energy, of authenticity, of depth. When you begin to face them, to sit with them, to understand them, something begins to shift. The unknown becomes known, the rejected becomes accepted, and the fragmented begins to move toward wholeness. You may notice that as you begin this process, resistance appears. There may be a desire to distract yourself, to move away from uncomfortable thoughts, to return to familiar patterns. This is natural. The mind is designed to protect itself, and facing the unconscious can feel like stepping into uncertainty. But this discomfort is not a sign that you are doing something wrong. It is often a sign that you're moving closer to something important. So, take a moment now. Bring your attention to your breath. Feel the rhythm of it steady and continuous. Let your body settle even slightly, and then gently allow a memory to come into your awareness, not forcing it, but allowing it. Notice what arises, not just the image, but the feeling associated with it. And instead of pushing it away, simply observe it. Ask yourself quietly, what is this trying to show me? Not in a way that demands an immediate answer, but in a way that opens a space for understanding. Because the unconscious does not always respond instantly. Sometimes it reveals itself gradually, through reflection, through awareness, through the simple act of paying attention. You may begin to see that the memory is not only about the past, it is about something that is still active within you. A belief, a fear, a pattern. And as you recognize it, you create the possibility of change. Because what is conscious can be transformed, while what remains unconscious continues to repeat. This is the beginning of what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming fully yourself, not by eliminating parts of who you are, but by integrating them, by bringing together the conscious and the unconscious, the light and the shadow, the known and the unknown. It is not a quick process, and it is not always comfortable, but it is deeply transformative. And as you continue to explore this inner landscape, you may begin to notice something else, that beneath the pain, beneath the fear, there is also a sense of clarity emerging, a deeper understanding of yourself, a greater sense of connection to who you are beyond your past experiences. Because the goal is not to erase what has happened, but to change your relationship to it. You are not defined by your memories, but you are shaped by how you understand them. And when you begin to see them not as fixed truths, but as experiences that can be interpreted, understood, and integrated, you begin to move from being controlled by the past to being informed by it. And that is where real change begins. In the next part, we will go deeper into how these patterns show up in your relationships, how the shadow operates in ways you may not immediately recognize, and how you can begin to actively work with it to create lasting transformation in your life. As you continue this inner journey, something important begins to reveal itself. The patterns in your relationships are not random events scattered across time. They are expressions of something deeper, something structured within your psyche, something that Carl Jung would describe as the dialogue between your conscious identity and your shadow. And once you begin to see this, you realize that the people who enter your life are not only companions or adversaries. They are also mirrors, reflecting parts of you that are still waiting to be understood. Think about the connections that have affected you the most. Often, they are not the calmest or the easiest ones, but the ones that stirred something intense within you, the ones that made you feel deeply seen or deeply wounded. Jung would suggest that this intensity is not accidental. It is a signal that something unconscious has been activated. The other person becomes a surface onto which you project parts of yourself, parts that you have not yet fully recognized. This process is called projection, and it is one of the most powerful mechanisms of the psyche. When you are not aware of certain traits or emotions within yourself, you tend to see them in others. You may strongly dislike someone because they appear arrogant, selfish, or insensitive. And yet, in a deeper sense, those reactions may be pointing toward aspects of yourself that you have learned to suppress or deny. At the same time, you may feel drawn to someone in an almost magnetic way, not fully understanding why. And this attraction can also be a form of projection, reflecting qualities within you that you have not yet allowed yourself to express. In relationships, this creates a complex dynamic. You are not only interacting with the other person as they are, but also with the image you have unconsciously placed onto them. This is why certain relationships feel so powerful, so consuming, because they are not only about the present moment, they are connected to deeper layers of your psyche. And when conflict arises, when pain surfaces, it is often because those projections are being challenged. You may notice patterns where you feel repeatedly misunderstood, or where you find yourself drawn to people who are emotionally unavailable, or where you experience cycles of closeness followed by distance. These patterns are not signs of failure. They are expressions of something that has not yet been integrated. The unconscious is attempting to bring something into awareness, and it uses relationships as one of its primary ways of doing so. Jung described another important concept that helps explain this: the distinction between persona and shadow. The persona is the version of yourself that you present to the world, the identity you construct in order to be accepted, to function within society, to meet expectations. It is necessary. It allows you to navigate life, but it is not the entirety of who you are. Behind the persona exists the shadow, the parts of you that do not fit that image, the parts you hide, reject, or feel ashamed of. The more rigid your persona becomes, the more energy is pushed into the shadow, and this creates tension within the psyche. Because the shadow does not disappear, it continues to exist, and it seeks expression. Sometimes it appears in subtle ways, through emotions you cannot fully explain, through reactions that feel stronger than the situation seems to warrant. Other times, it appears more directly, through behaviors that seem out of character, moments when you act in ways that surprise even yourself. In relationships, this dynamic becomes even more pronounced. You may present a certain version of yourself, calm, understanding, accommodating, while suppressing feelings of anger, frustration, or need. Over time, those suppressed feelings do not vanish. They accumulate, and eventually they find a way to surface, sometimes suddenly, sometimes in ways that feel overwhelming. This is not because something is wrong with you. It is because something within you has not been acknowledged. When you begin to understand this, you start to see that healing is not about becoming a perfect version of yourself, free of all negative emotions. It is about becoming a whole version of yourself, one that includes both the light and the shadow. It is about recognizing that the parts you have rejected are still part of you, and that they carry energy that can be transformed when it is understood. For example, what appears as anger in the shadow may, when integrated, become clarity and the ability to set boundaries. What appears as selfishness may transform into self-respect. What appears as fear may reveal a deeper sensitivity and awareness. The shadow is not simply something to be eliminated, it is something to be integrated, to be brought into conscious awareness so that its energy can be used in a constructive way. This is why Jung emphasized that true growth does not come from avoiding discomfort, but from engaging with it. When you encounter chaos in your life, moments where things fall apart, where certainty disappears, where you feel lost, it is easy to interpret this as failure. But Jung saw chaos differently. He saw it as a necessary stage in transformation, a space where old structures dissolve so that new ones can emerge. Chaos is uncomfortable because it removes the familiar. It takes away the patterns and identities that once provided stability. But within that disruption lies possibility. It creates space for something new, something more aligned with your authentic self. The key is not to escape the chaos, but to move through it with awareness, to remain present even when things feel uncertain. When you look back at moments in your life that felt like breaking points, you may begin to see that they were also turning points, that within the confusion and pain, there were lessons, insights, realizations that could not have emerged in a state of comfort. This does not mean that suffering is desirable, but it does mean that it can be meaningful when it is understood. Take a moment now to reflect on a situation that disrupted your sense of stability. It may have been a relationship ending, a decision that did not lead where you expected, a moment where you felt lost. Instead of only seeing what was lost, consider what was revealed. What did that experience show you about yourself, about your needs, about your patterns? What did it make visible that had previously been hidden? Jung would say that this is how the unconscious communicates, not through direct instruction, but through experience. And when you begin to interpret these experiences with awareness, they become guides rather than obstacles. They show you where attention is needed, where healing is possible, where growth is waiting. Another important aspect of this process is self-love, but not in the superficial sense of simply feeling good about yourself. Jung's perspective on self-love is rooted in honesty. It is the willingness to see yourself fully without denial, without exaggeration, without distortion. It is the ability to acknowledge both your strengths and your limitations, your light and your shadow, without rejecting either. Many people struggle with this because they have learned to associate self-acceptance with complacency, or they have been taught that focusing on themselves is selfish. But in reality, self-awareness and self-acceptance are the foundation of healthy relationships and meaningful growth. When you understand yourself, you are less likely to project unresolved issues onto others. When you accept yourself, you are less dependent on external validation. This does not mean that you stop growing or improving. It means that your growth is no longer driven by self-rejection, but by self-understanding. You're not trying to become someone else, you're becoming more fully yourself. And this shift changes how you relate to others. You're less reactive, less dependent on approval, more grounded in your own sense of worth. Boundaries become an important part of this process. When you recognize your value, you begin to understand that not every behavior should be tolerated. Not every relationship should be maintained at any cost. Setting boundaries is not an act of rejection toward others. It is an act of respect toward yourself. It communicates to your unconscious that your well-being matters, that your energy is worth protecting. Jung would argue that every time you allow your boundaries to be crossed without acknowledgement, you reinforce a belief within yourself that your needs are secondary. And over time, this creates imbalance, both internally and in your relationships. But when you begin to assert your boundaries with clarity and respect, you shift that internal message. You begin to affirm your own value, not through words alone, but through action. This process also influences your future. The unresolved aspects of your past do not remain isolated. They shape your expectations, your fears, your choices. A memory that was never fully understood may continue to influence how you approach new opportunities, how you respond to challenges, how you see yourself. But when you bring awareness to it, when you reinterpret it with understanding, its influence begins to change. Imagine a moment from your past that still carries emotional weight. Instead of seeing it as a fixed definition of who you are, begin to see it as a moment in your story, one that can be understood differently. You can acknowledge what happened without allowing it to define your entire identity. You can recognize the impact it had without allowing it to determine your future. This is not about denying reality. It is about expanding your perspective. It is about recognizing that your past is part of you, but it is not all of you. And when you begin to see it in this way, you create space for new possibilities, new ways of thinking, new ways of being. Jung described this entire process as individuation, the journey toward becoming whole. It is not a destination that you reach once and for all. It is an ongoing process of awareness, integration, and growth. It requires patience, honesty, and courage because it involves facing aspects of yourself that you may have avoided for a long time. But it also offers something profound, a deeper sense of alignment with who you are, a greater sense of peace within yourself, a clearer understanding of your place in the world. Because as you integrate your shadow, as you bring the unconscious into awareness, you become less divided internally. You begin to act from a place of coherence rather than conflict. And this transformation does not only affect you, it influences how you interact with others, how you respond to challenges, how you move through life. When you are more aware of your own patterns, you are less likely to be unconsciously driven by them. When you understand your own pain, you are more capable of empathy without losing yourself. When you accept your own complexity, you are more open to the complexity of others. So now, return to the question that began this journey. What memory, what feeling, what pattern has been following you? Instead of seeing it as something to escape, consider that it may be something to understand, something that holds within it not only pain, but also insight, not only difficulty, but also potential. Take a breath again, slowly, intentionally. And as you exhale, allow yourself to recognize that this process, this movement toward awareness, has already begun. You do not need to force it. You only need to continue it. One moment of awareness at a time, one layer of understanding at a time. Because healing, in the deepest sense, is not about erasing the past. It is about transforming your relationship to it. And in doing so, you transform your relationship to yourself.